Good morning or good night or good evening if you're tuning in to me before you go to bed or in the morning. Anyway, going forward, I'll always have the next day's lessons done the day before. So, for instance, today's Monday, I will have Tuesday's lesson posted by around this time or earlier every day before. So, first things first, we're going to continue where we left off on solving quadratics. More importantly, we're going to look at using the 4 different methods to solve quadratics and really practice those skills. So, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to solve by factoring, and then we'll go into solving by taking square roots, and then we'll go into solving by completing the square, and last but not least, solving using the quadratic formula. We are going to be studying this skill all week so that when we go into the book by next week, it should be smooth sailing, hopefully by then, and then just refine the skills with applications and word questions, stuff that y'all love. So, first things first, we'll start easy with factoring. This one's rather simple. Again, you always ask yourself, what multiplies to this C term that also adds to this B term? So I know my factors are 5 and 2, and because I have a positive C and a negative B, I'm going to have a negative 5 and a negative 2. So my factors are x minus 5 and x minus 2 equals 0. So your factors are x equals 5 and x equals 2. Those are your two solutions. Now, this one's a little harder to factor, and normally I would tell you guys to, use the formula or another method, because when the leading coefficient is bigger than 1, it's just a little extra work, but I want you guys to practice this and follow the rules because it's just good math skills at the end of the day. So how do I factor this? Well, I don't know exactly, so I'm going to just do this. And I know that the prime number is 2, so I'm going to do a 2 here. I can do it either or. I always do my higher coefficient in the first parentheses, just as a creature of habit. I'm going to do plus here, minus here. So again, this is why you write in pencil because you're going to be making mistakes during this. So I'm going to just do 6 and 2 here, see what I get. I'm not worried about this multiplying the negative 12 because I know it does. I care about this middle term. So I got negative 4x plus 6x makes a positive 2x. So I know that's not going to work. So this is just a quick way to go through it, okay? And again, double check. I got negative 12x, positive 2x makes negative 10x. So maybe 6 and 2 are not my factors. Maybe 3 and 4 are my factors. So let's see here. I got a negative 8x, and I got a positive 3x. Negative 8 plus 3 is negative 5x, and this time this is negative 12. So we're good there. So now here's how we find the factors. One of these is really easy to see because I know that when x equals 4, this whole thing equals 0. Because again, what you're doing in your head instead of being a robot is you're doing solve for x to find out when this parentheses equals 0. So you add 4 to both sides, so x equals 4. That's how I know that instead of just being robotic. Because this one requires a little more work. So I got 2x plus 3 equals 0. So now you got to solve for x because each of these are equal to 0. Subtract 3 from both sides, 2x equals 3, divide by 2 on both sides, x equals 3 halves. Here are both of your answers for the solutions of this quadratic. That is your roughly 4-minute rundown of solving by factoring. I expect there to be some questions in tomorrow's Zoom. So just ask away. The next one we're going to do is solve by taking square roots. Solve by taking square roots. So, first things first, I got this one. 6 plus 3x squared equals 54. Now, remember, quadratic is usually in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. Now, I see there's no middle term here, so I'm going to try to get around all that funky junk we were doing earlier with the parentheses and everything. Let's just solve for x. That's just the basic thing here, so let's just do that. Subtract 6 on both sides. 3x squared equals 54 minus 6 is 48. Divide both sides by 3. X squared equals 16. Take the square root of both sides. Remember, this is always plus or minus this answer here. So I'm going to have x equals plus or minus 4. And that would be good. And if you want to be meticulous, be my guest and write down x equals 4 and x equals -4. Now let's do one that's a little trickier, a little not as clean as this one. So I'll leave that one up for you guys. So let's say I got 7 minus 3x squared equals negative 15. Let's follow the same process, do the exact same thing we did earlier, and just subtract 7 from both sides. So now I got a negative 3x squared equals negative 15 minus 7 is negative 22. We are dividing both sides by a negative 3. Be aware, negative divided by negative is positive, so now x squared will equal 22 over 3. I don't care of the decimal answer that a lot of you want to use. Keep it in fraction form, always. Last but not least, just square root both sides, knowing that your answer will be plus or minus. Because 22 and 3 are under the square root sign, and neither of those numbers are perfect square factors, your final answer is x equals plus or minus square root of 22 thirds. And you're done. And that is a sufficient answer. Moving on, we're going to do some completing the square and then some quadratic formula. So this should all hopefully be a refresher for you and just really knocking it home, making this hopefully easier now. So I got completing the square. Now, you're going to see me do things a little different than what I've done in the past because I'm not trying to find the vertex. So it's not necessary to solve it in vertex form and then, write it in vertex form and then try to solve it from there. You can speed things up a little bit and I'll explain that and I'll leave both examples up so you can see what I'm talking about as we do this. So the first one is x squared minus 2x minus 11 equals 0. I'm sorry, my bad. Equals 4. Okay? So you'll see some stuff like this. So, first things first, I'm going to bring my c to the right side of the equation because, again, I'm solving. I'm not trying to find the vertex. So, eventually, I'm moving all the numbers to the right side anyway to solve for it, as you'll see in a minute. So now this says x squared minus 2x. I'm leaving a space here because I still got to find that number here, equals 15. Remember, I take half of this number and I square it. So that's going to be plus 1. Okay? Now, before, if I brought a 1 into the equation, I take it out by doing the opposite, which is true if it was on the same side of the equation. But now, I want to keep my balance level. So because I brought a 1 in over here, I got to also bring a 1 over here to this positive. So I can just do exactly what I brought into both sides so that my equation stays balanced level. So now this says x minus 1 squared equals 16. Now let's solve for x. Square root both sides, knowing this is plus or minus. X minus 1 equals plus or minus 4. So when you add 1 to both sides, you get an answer of 1 plus 4 is 5. And 1 minus 4 is negative 3. These would be your two answers. Again, this is, and I'm going to show you what I mean by all of what I just did right here by doing another example. So now let's say I got this one, 2x squared minus 4x minus 6 equals 0, okay? Now, I'm not going to bring my c to the right side. I'm going to leave this equal to 0 so you can see what I meant in the last example. Because my coefficient of a is bigger than 1, I have to divide this term out of both of these first two terms. So I put this in parentheses. I got 2x squared minus 2x, leave that space, minus 6. Half of negative 2 is negative 1. Negative 1 squared is positive 1. I brought in a positive 2 to this equation that I must take out. See what I mean here? I added 1 to the left side. I also added 1 to the right side in the previous example. But because I didn't move the numbers to the right side yet, I brought in a positive 2. I must take out a negative 2 because it's on the same side of the equation. Hopefully that's making sense. If not, I'll answer your questions tomorrow. Now I go, and I'm going to do 2x minus 1 squared minus 8 equals 0. Now remember, I'm solving, I don't care about the vertex. So I'm going to add 8 to both sides. I'm going to add 8. So now this says 2 2 parentheses x minus 1 squared equals 8. I got to first divide by 2 before I do anything else. X minus 1 squared equals 4. Now I take the square root of both sides, okay? And I'm left with x minus 1 equals plus or minus 2. And I add 1 to both sides. X is going to be 1 plus 2 is 3. And x equals negative 1. Those are the two answers for these types of examples and stuff you'll see in today's work. So that takes me through that. And my last example is the quadratic formula. So, quadratic formula. Remember, opposite of b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay? I anticipate that a lot of you will be urging to use this a lot going forward because it's rather simple. So, first example is going to be x squared minus 3x minus 4 equals 0. Well, rewrite the numbers with the letters. Opposite of negative 3 is 3 plus or minus, remember, negative 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 4 all over 2 times 1, because that's 1 right there. Don't forget that. So now we got 3 plus or minus square root of 9, because that's negative 3 squared, which is positive 9. Negative times positive is going to be a positive answer. Please make sure you're always doing that, because you're going to make so many mistakes if you don't, and I've seen it time and again. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16 all over 2. I get 3 plus or minus, and remember this equals 25. Square root of 25 is 5. Trying to speed things up here for the sake of my space, or lack thereof. 3 plus 5, 8 divided by 2 is 4. 3 minus 5, negative 2, divided by 2 is negative 1. So these are your solutions for this type of quadratic using the formula. Now let's do a different one. Okay? 5x squared plus 2x minus 2 equals 0. Again, just rewrite using this formula. I got negative 2 plus or minus square root of, well, b is 2. 2 squared is 4 minus 4 times 5 times negative 2 all over 2 times 5. So now this is negative 2 plus or minus square root of, again, negative times negative is positive. Don't forget that. I got 4 times, negative 4 times 5 is negative 20, times negative 2 is positive 40. 4 plus 40 is square root of 44 all over 10. Okay? Now, here's where something we did in the past is going to play into what we're doing now with this quadratics. 44 is not a perfect square. However, it has a perfect square factor, such as 4 and 11. Remember this? Remember the 4 is under the square root. The 4 comes outside of the square root as a 2. Don't forget that. Remember, this is the perfect square. It comes out and it sits right in front of this. So now this says negative 2 plus or minus 4 comes outside as a 2 radical 11 all over 10. Last but not least, all my numbers on the outside, all my negative 2, 2, and 10, these are all divisible by 2. So your final answer is going to be negative 1 plus or minus, we don't write the 1 in front of this, we never do, square root of 11 all over 5. And this takes care of that type of question and some stuff that you most likely will see in this work that I have assigned. I'm focusing on this for the majority of the week, making sure you guys are all on point, and then we'll do graphs and stuff later, and then we'll dive into a book of some sort by next week. So I will see you guys later for questions.